Brandon. Thank you so much for being on. A pleasure to talking with you.
Robin, thank you so much for having me on. Love your pod. It's an honor to be on here. Thank you, sir.
That's great, man. I met you in Vegas, and now we made with a mutual friend again, touch point, and I was like, I have to have you on. You're a great guy. But for the few people that don't know you and don't know that you're a great guy like me, give the few people a little bit of a background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Oh boy, I was telling you offline. Obviously, 15 years ago, as a kid graduating, playing hockey at Michigan State University, had an incredible career, just played all over the world, kind of traversed around where your stomping grounds a bit and played international tournaments and played for the U.S., the United States national team, under 17 team, under 18 team, won a world championship there, won a national championship at Michigan State, and played in the professionally for a couple of years, and started getting hurt really 18 to 24. It's the only time I got hurt in my life, was the years that it mattered. God had a different plan for me, and that around that time was when the great financial crash was happening, and 08, 9, 10, 11, 12, and all those years I was leaving school and then in the minors. And it just became very obvious that, and I was always questioning teachers growing up and things of that nature, and fighting with them and arguing with people about politics and when are we going to make money and just different stuff like that. And it became very clear. So I happened to be in the grocery store one day and just had a little book, whispering, a little book whispering to me. And it was, ironically, a Donald Trump book. But it was with Robert Kiyosaki, and it was Why We Want You to Be Rich. And it was like $3 in the bargain bin. And I picked it up and just blew my mind wide open, just changed my life forever. And it was all about, your money making money for you, using, intelligent leverage, we'll call it, using, the money is no longer money. It's currency now after 1971, just all these different dynamics. And it just totally, like, I got mad. I was also very hopeful because you kind of found the answer in a way. But I also very mad at just why no one told me this. And it was just something I had been searching for and just didn't have the right direction necessarily, or didn't find the right thing until then. And so it led me to reading Creature from Jekyll Island and their other books, and more of Robert Kiyosaki's books, and reading about monetary history led me to Mike Maloney, Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. So I really got into real estate and gold and silver as I was leaving hockey in like 2011, 2012, did that for 10 years. And I was obviously in that world. So I was finding Bitcoin as it would be, obviously, in 2015, or I don't know, probably 2014, 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. I don't even know when I heard about Bitcoin the first time. Don't know how I didn't hear about it earlier, since I was already in that world studying things so much. But, I finally really grokked it, I would say probably 2017, 2018. That's when I really started buying much more, and just kind of like, okay, I'm going all in on this thing. This is the answer to political things. Because for a long time I realized, because I was so political as a kid, and then seeing what happened in 08, seeing what happened in 2012 here in America, it was very obvious that there were two different, fake sides. It was not red versus blue, it was a state versus you. And it was just controlled opposition. It was, people just doing weird things, and not what the constituents, the voters wanted them to do. And for a long story short, so it just became very obvious that we were going the wrong direction. We're leaving freedom, we're leaving sovereignty, we're leaving decentralization. We're so federalized, we're so centralized into one place in Washington, D.C. And obviously all the governments of the world have done that. So it just became very obvious that we're anything but what the founding fathers of America had talked about, which the founding fathers were people from all over the world, really. I mean, obviously a lot of them are from Northern Europe, or, European settlers. And they wrote about all the governments of the world. They studied all the governments of the world for thousands of years. So it wasn't like some happenstance, like, oh, we just had a dream one day and we woke up and wrote these documents, or hey, we're going grabbing our muskets and going fighting for this. It was something that they thought about and talked about, and then fought a war about. And so that was how I grew up. My dad was that way. That was ingrained in me, reading those documents, just over and over again throughout the year. So it was, again, like, I'd fight with school because they didn't teach you a lot of those things. And it was already 30 years ago, becoming very different, your schooling here in America. So government run schooling. So that's where Bitcoin, I finally realized Bitcoin, there's that money layer is what's controlling, obviously, the political layer. And so that's where it became very obvious. Hey, Bitcoin's the only thing that I've seen. Again, all of us could be wrong. I mean, there's anything in life that could happen. I mean, an asteroid could hit the earth and we all get taken out. And then, I don't know, Bitcoin doesn't win, I guess. I don't know. Sure. But it was the only thing where it's like, well, we know all these systems have failed, all of them. So why would we keep doing the same thing? But we have this thing right here, Bitcoin, that quenches the thirst, I guess, for sound money. It does the things that gold can't do: final settlement across space, hold your time and energy across, millennia, all these things that gold just had a hard time doing. The time over a millennia, gold has done that for the most part, but final settlement can't do that. Get centralized, people get scared to hold it, so then they obviously, there's claim checks, and then we have dollars and paper currency as claim checks and IOUs on the gold. So we have thousands of years of history telling us that gold and silver were great in localized, maybe very free banking, very local, small economies, but it doesn't work in a huge national global world. So Bitcoin really checks those last couple of boxes that gold never could, and just physically can't. So that's where it became hey, I'm so sick of fighting red versus blue. Like, why wouldn't we go this direction? It became very easy. I remember Pierre Rochard talking before, like, yeah, I found it in 2012, and I was like, oh, then this next year is gonna be amazing. Like, everyone's gonna get this. It's gonna solve all our problems. And he's like, yeah, cutscene. It's like, what, 13 years later, and nothing's changed. So long story long, it's the whole thing, I think, to me, is that I've kind of resigned myself back to coming full circle. You kind of go through this journey, a gauntlet. Like, Bitcoiners don't just become Bitcoiners like overnight. They're not like, oh, I'm number go up boy. Like, that's the crypto crowd. The crypto crowd thinks in fiat terms. They think in number go up terms, whatever. That might get people into Bitcoin, but the real ones, the truth seekers, stay for the freedom, and they're the ones that are the revolutionaries, the ones grabbing the musket, so to speak, and saying, I'm going out there, the 3%. So I'm really stuck on this fact that the 3% really fought the Revolutionary War here in America, and the ones that dragged everyone across the finish line. And there was more people that were maybe before supported it, but only a couple percent dragged everyone, physically said, I'm sick of this. I'm not doing this anymore. And most of us just sit around and wait for things to happen to us in life. And there's a couple percent of people that say, no, we're not doing this. And those are the change makers in life. Those are the people that say, we're not doing this. I'm grabbing this thing, we're going, and I'm dragging the rest of society with me. And I'm really resigned to the fact that 3 being one of those, natural law, maybe divine numbers. And so you have this 3% we need to get to in order to move the rest of humanity across the finish line. Because in America, at least, you have the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. That was, again, the couple percent of people gave the other 97% those rights. The other 97% wouldn't have those rights if it wasn't for those couple percent. So the cavalry's not coming. There's not going to be, tens and hundreds of millions of people necessarily, or billions of people just following you. We need to get to, maybe 10 million, 20, 50 million of true, authentic, freedom seeking, Bitcoiners that actually get it and understand the system change and the pain and then the reward we need to go through. And so that's, some of my story, I guess, kind of wrapped into why I'm hopeful about Bitcoin, because it's the only chance, other than Christ coming back to earth, and you have the deity come and, say, hey, I'm the truth, and I'm taking you all with me. I mean, until that happens, there's no other human answer, secular answer on earth I have ever seen. When you go through all of this, natural law, divine law, first principles, thermodynamic law, like all these things, when you go through all these critical thinking pieces, it's the only logical conclusion you can come to at that point. Unfortunately, we don't live in a logical world. We live in a very emotional world, which leads into some of the threats I even was thinking about earlier when you messaged me of, Seyr has talked about this, like one of the biggest threats, and we have different fights going on with, core versus knots and all these different things. But one of the biggest threats is the frog in the boiling pot. We have it with fiat. Most people don't know fiat, the fiat system and how it works. They're the frog. We're all the frog in the boiling pot. How does a fish know he's wet if he's grown up in the water his whole life? Well, here we go again with Bitcoin. You have to be careful, because 16 years in, yeah, you have a lot of people that haven't gone through this fight now. And we have young kids, you're going to have kids someday. I have 4 young kids. They might grow up knowing, hey, Bitcoin's the thing, but will they know the properties? Will they know the reason Bitcoin is so important? And unless you've gone through those fights, it is hard at times to understand the importance of it, just like the principles that the Constitution of the Bill of Rights has. A lot of people in America have forgotten that the beauty of that, what gave them this prosperity. And it's those laws, those morals, or values, those ethics, whatever you want to call them, that give you that ability to then have a prosperous world. You're not just entitled to them. You don't just wake up and those are earned. They're not given. So I think that, to me, is the big thing. Like Seyr has said, if people lose the wantingness, or they lose the lure for sound money, they don't understand it, or again, the frog in the boiling pot of, you just kind of get psyoped over time. You know what? All the Bitcoin centralized in a few honeypots, not that big of a deal. Come on, guys. It's not that big of a deal. Most people won't actually self-custody their Bitcoin. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But yeah, like, we have to keep educating, because we need a couple percent of ardent, irate minority to continually push that line and really snap society back toward the truth. Because again, most people will not, we're rationalizing human beings. Most people will not accept truth on face. It's very hard. It's not easy. I don't necessarily understand it. I try to do everything in my power to understand when I'm rationalizing things or I'm not accepting truth to the degree that I should be. So that to me, I think is why I'm so hopeful. And because I see that it gives us at least the human chance here on Earth to actually right the ship, go to a type 1 society and move on from the thousands of years of, the chaos I guess we've had.
Man, there was a lot in there. I love that. The frog analogy was amazing because I do have this thing, and you mentioned it in the beginning where you said like, oh, like 2012, you think like, oh, it will take like 1-2 years and we all get it, and then cut to 13 years, and you're like, oh, still nobody gets Bitcoin. I mean, of course, the conferences got bigger.
Right.
We now have, as you mentioned, Donald Trump, the US president, at least talking about Bitcoin. We can debate how much he understands it, but at least he talks about it. He's on conferences and all of that. So there has been major developments. But then again, you go out on the streets, ask 100 people, what is the difficulty adjustment? And you're very lucky if you get one good answer of that. And so it's like, because we are emotional creatures, because we are not logical creatures, because we are not AI, it takes actually a long time to orange pill the world, and from like getting to 0 to 100, it's like a long freaking time, and we all have this like fear of missing out. Of like, oh, like I got Bitcoin, now I have to get as many as possible. I have to like keep stacking, and how many do I have to get? And then it's like, oh yeah, like calm down. The world probably won't get it tomorrow, and you probably have some time to stack till Apple and Google buys Bitcoin. It probably will take some time till this actually happens. But as you said, this frog example, like I actually looked at that once, and there's a lot of frog examples where the frog actually jumps out. Like it's funny because I think if you turn up the heat too much, and like not the frog actually, but like the people with inflation and pain from the fiat currency, I do think people will jump out. Like people are not that stupid. They might be blind or arrogant or ignorant to the solution of Bitcoin, but I turn up mainstream news every day for like 5-10 minutes to see what's kind of the mainstream narrative right now. And the mainstream narrative is we have to fight inflation. I have never seen that. I've never seen the mainstream narrative being so focused on that we have to fight inflation. The solutions are outrageously bad, what they're proposing. Like, oh, we have to do rent control. Like, oh shit, like that will not do anything. But at least they're talking about the problem that Bitcoiners are yelling about since, what is it, 16 years now?
Mm-hmm.
With all that in mind, I have a very simple question in mind. Like, how fast do you think the frog will get to actually jump out of the board, and how do you think he will get it? Is it like, do you foresee a major catastrophe where like all of a sudden like, oh fuck, like we really have to get out of that, or is it just like gradually and then we're hitting obviously like nobody really knows, but this is just a question of like, I know we will get to Bitcoin. I just have a hard time understanding how the heck we will get there if nobody seems to still get it, even though inflation is a real big problem.
Well, this is a question of our time, right, Robin? I mean, this is a thing I go back and forth on more than anything. And, my dad always said the pain is a good teacher. And for some reason, humans, again, we're rationalizing creatures. We, for good reason, we probably don't just jerk around and make decisions as a society very quickly, because that'd be very jarring for a civilization, or especially a global civilization now. So you can imagine like the world operating as an entrepreneur. Like, can you imagine if 8 million people were like, I'm doing this and then I'm doing that? Like, that would be absolute insanity, right? So most people move very slowly. Society moves very slowly, again, for good reason. In saying that, I do think that it's going to be black swan events. I think more of this is going to happen. I think I've said probably since I was in high school, there's going to be probably a civil war at some point. I do think, though, there's been a civil war and depression really here in America. Maybe across the world. I know America better, but like everyone knows the website WTF happened in 1971. I would actually, my opinion is that is the depression. Like the last 50 years are the depression. A lot of middle class have lost their like wealth just through inflation. Obviously, the poor have got really squeezed. The wealth gap has widened, and the biggest factor to me, because some of the technology has masked a lot of that, right? Like they mentioned the computer and like cars have gotten better. So a lot of people, they can't see it, right? Going back to the frog in the boiling pot. But I think that the pain part has to come for whatever reason, just to reset society. And it's not the end of the world. Obviously, like it's not that it's a bad thing. Like, yes, are people going to get hurt? Yeah. I mean, like, but we all die someday. Like, hate to break it to everybody, but like everyone, we're all terminal, like everyone's, it just, that's what happens. And for some reason, humans just, they have a hard time, grasping that. But it's very real to understand that and get right with yourself in that sense, because pain is a good teacher. And I do think that there are going to be things, because this is like the fight that it is, right? Like you have like the guys that say, and gals, there's, status number go up people. And then there's like the cypherpunk crowd. And then there's different crowds of factions. And I don't know, like you just said, I don't know, how do you square the circle of like, are we just little L's like up in the North Pole, and we're just like building on Bitcoin, and then like we show up like 15 years from now and say, hey guys, we've got a new system, here it is, like we're just unveiling it, and then just boom, the iceberg flips, and then here we go, new system. I don't think that's how it happens. Like I think it probably does happen this way, where governments, if we, like Jeff Booth says, if it stays decentralized and secure, and we keep educating about it, and there's people out there like this, a couple % of people in what you're doing, right, and educating people, then hopefully there's always going to be that flicker of light that keeps people centered, and to say, hey, here's what it's supposed to be. I know these people, the people that we don't want to have Bitcoin, whatever it is, ETFs, governments, big corporations, you name it. However, here's the truth. Here's the light right here. And as long as that doesn't go out somewhere in the world, then I think we're good. Like, then I think we're going to be fine. And it's going to, like you said, it'll happen over time. I just don't know how, how do you Trojan horse and defund the corrupt, government legacy, fiat monetary system, debt-based system, unless you get the Trojan horse inside the gates. If we're just building at the North Pole outside the gates the whole time, then we show up at the gates and say, hey guys, let us in. I think we need to use all this. I don't know. Because again, if we're going to try to educate every last human being, that might take 100 years, 500 years, 50 years, 10 years. I don't know. But at the same time, I'm of the opinion, that's where I think I have a hard time with it. The average person just not built to understand what's going on, unfortunately. Like it's a pipe dream I just, like, it goes back to the Pierre Rochard quote. Like if people 16 years in, with all the technology and communication we have now, I feel like we'd have a lot more people that would really grok Bitcoin and be Bitcoiners at this point. With, if this is 200, 500 years ago, like I get Bitcoin not spreading that quickly, but I mean, at this point, like I'm kind of questioning, if you don't understand Bitcoin or you don't have a really good story about Bitcoin, then where you been? And so that just kind of tells you a little bit of where we're headed, that it's going to be a grind, and don't expect it to be so easy. Like, oh, the US is going to buy Bitcoin and then all of our dreams are going to come true. Like that's not how it's going to happen. It's going to happen probably through, look at one of the greatest orange pillars of all time was probably Justin Trudeau. Right. And then the Dutch, farmers, like you go through these different events, and these guys are doing things that take sovereignty away, or what happened in Australia. Your people are getting welded into their homes. That's what wakes people up, unfortunately, at the end of the day. And again, number go up. So those two things, fear and greed, are the things that, again, we have to admit, those are the things that get the number to go up. All this education in the interim, the things that, these podcasts, these are the things like in between those events to like keep people on the straight and narrow, to like educate, obviously, like keep the intelligence high, to be there when people are ready to find it, stuff like that. And obviously it orange pills people there, but it's not the magnitude of what these black swan, like good and bad black swan events are, whether it's price going up or something like that. And you made me think of, as well, going back to the very first thing you kind of asked, is how, I think it was Howard Dean, like 20 years ago, it was in the 2000s, said, basically, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he was like, yeah, we can't tax people too much. This was like on a national news show. And he was like, we can't tax people too much, because then they'll kind of figure out, we have to give them just enough socialism, so that way they don't wake up, they don't jump out of the pot, in essence. That's why it made me think of this. And it's one of those things where there are times when the politicians will let the cat out of the bag. There's another time, like 5 years later, when Obama's health guy, I forget who it was, his health czar that created the Obamacare law here in America. He was like, yeah, lack of transparency is a great political tool. And he's literally on camera. It's still on YouTube. You can find it. There's 2-minute clips of him in a conference saying this, admitting this to everybody, and saying, yeah, lack of transparency, great political tool. Like, the American people are too stupid to figure out that they needed this. So we needed to basically lie to them and just jam it down their throat, and in order for the best of them. And you just kind of look back and that, like, if you have this out there and people still don't wake up and realize there's a game being played on them, and you are just a pawn, just a digit, a statistic in these people's world and how they operate, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, that kind of stuff, it lights my brain on fire, and has since I was a child. But the average person, again, been so sedated, and so their will's been broken so much, which is by design. You read a lot of this stuff from 100 years ago to 150 years ago, Karl Marx, different writings, different stuff like that. A lot of the goal was to break the will of capitalism, break the will of people that were in capitalism, and to destroy the family unit and things of that nature. So we're living through the end game of a lot of what has happened there. So, and then you go back to, the last thing I'll say about it is just that you go back to, again, the quiet part out loud. I think it was 1943 or 1944. It was like American Affairs, some type of magazine here in America, that wrote out the different bullet points about, it was Beardsley Rummel, I think, who was like the Fed head of New York. And he literally wrote an article that said taxes for revenue are obsolete. And they wrote like 4 bullet points in the article of like what taxes were for. And it was like, we do it to coerce people to do what we want them to do, to redistribute wealth to people we want, blah, 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 whatever. Like, I mean, it is right there, black and white. So you have video of people saying it, recently. You've got, 70 years ago, you have people talking about it in print. So at the end of the day, like, if people have ears to hear and eyes to see, they will find the truth. But at the end of the day, the education is there. All of it's there. I do think that'll be good and bad. It'll be Bitcoin ripping people's faces off, number go up on the plus side. And then on the negative side, yeah, there's going to be bad things happen. Obviously, some stuff in America just in the last week here. There's numerous events that have just happened that people still don't get it. They don't understand how to protect themselves. They don't understand. They keep doing that, beating their head against the wall, doing the same thing over and over again, thinking they're going to get different results. We do it everywhere. With protecting schools, we do it thinking if we take the shooters, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. If we take the actual weapons out of school, that it's going to make things safer. We tried this for 30 years and it's only made things more unsafe. We always are like doing opposite what feels good at the time, instead of doing the right thing, the short-term pain for the long-term gain. So anyway, I could wax poetic for hours about some of these things, but I think that, to me, we're going to have these events that are going to happen on the plus and negative side that are going to jar people out of their stupor.
That's fascinating, and it's also, it makes me a lot to think about, where you like, how will people actually look back at this Bitcoin revolution, as like you have so many different revolutions in the history, and people look back and what they thought it is at the time, and now with more information, what we actually we now think it was and what it actually was. So there's a lot of different aspects of Bitcoin, because I think without the financial freedom, you cannot have any other freedom. I mean, it's very important to have freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and all of those things. But at the very center is financial freedom. I mean, there are people that argue that financial freedom is freedom of speech, because transferring in value is also kind of a communication style. But this money part, this financial freedom part, is, in my opinion, the most important one. This is the fundamental layer, where then everything else comes from that. Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast, and if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here, or here. Oh, maybe also here.